Absolutely not. Absolutely not. It's hard to own your first home. But last year, 164,000 Australians did. They bought their first home. Now, when Labor was last in office, in their last year, there were 91,300 Australians who bought their first home. And under our government, under the Home Guarantee Scheme, under the Home Builder Scheme, under the First Home Super Saver Scheme, two of those schemes Labor opposed. We've ensured that 300,000 Australians over the last 3 years have been able to get into their first home and or into their own home at a time when it's been hard to do so. So no, about two-thirds or thereabouts, it moves around, about two-thirds of Australians either own their home outright or are paying it off through their mortgage. It's always hard. I mean, if you talk to the people I was talking to just before, we're talking about when they bought their first home. It's always been hard, and it's increasingly hard, particularly today. But what the figures show is that 164,000 Australians last year getting into their first home. That's up almost 70,000 on what Labor was achieving when they were in office. And I'd say it's even harder now than it was then. But because of the targeted supports and the well-designed policies that we've put in place, we've been able to help them do it. And we've done it in a way where they own their own home. Labor has a plan where they want the government to own your home. And not only that, you're last in line when it comes to your home. The bank has the first call over it, the government has the second call over it, and you come last when it comes to your own home. See, when you design these policies, you need to understand the housing market and you need to understand the economy. And you need to understand the banking and financial system. And that is how you can run plans and programs as we have had that has seen over 300,000 Australians get into their own home, not one that the government owns.
You had a similar idea of a government or a private equity scheme in housing in 2008. What has changed between now and then for you to be slamming Labor's policy?
Well, I had no plan for a government owning people's homes. Shared equity schemes have been around a long time. They've been around a long time, and some people choose to do them in the private sector. And during the course of the global financial crisis, there was a credit squeeze. And there was a real problem being faced, particularly by regional banks, Bendigo Bank being one in particular, because of the lack of liquidity in the debt market that was enabling them to provide the products that they wanted to provide and that people were providing and seeking. So that was a very different set of issues.
5 years ago, you said that the Victorian government doing a similar government scheme was a good idea. So what has changed?
Well, I think I've made it pretty clear. State governments, there's a scheme like this in Western Australia. There's a scheme like this in South Australia. And the take-up of these schemes is very limited. And one of the reasons for that is people want to own their own home. They don't want the government to own their home. Now, if people want to go into a shared equity mortgage, those products have been around for a long time. The private sector provides those products. And what I was referring to back in 2011, I think it was in the middle of a global financial crisis where there was a squeeze on credit. So I was proffering sensible interventions that would enable the private sector to give people more choices. If people want to take those choices up, that's up to them. But in terms of the federal government effectively becoming an owner of your home, and now there are questions about this. So what happens if you decide to renovate your home? I mean, what Labor have been very clear about is they have a share in your home, and so as your home value increases, they're making money off you. So as your home price goes up, your home value goes up, they are taking a cut. And so you have to pay the government back on their equity and with the capital appreciation. I mean, they are basically riding on your decision to buy your own home. And it's for 10,000 people. And so you'll be going along to an auction and there'll be someone who's bidding against you and they'll be bidding with the government and you'll be bidding on your own. And so I don't think Labor have thought these things through. We've seen this. We've seen their health policies that weren't costed. We've seen their other policies in these campaigns fall apart after about 24 hours. Their aged care policy fell apart within 24 hours after their budget and reply. The problem with Labor, this is what happens when you haven't done budgets and you haven't held a financial portfolio like Mr Albanese. You don't know how all these pieces go together, and they don't think them through. And that is too big a risk for Australians to be facing, with the many pressures that are on interest rates, on cost of living, and it really is a choice about who do you think is going to be able to better manage those very significant pressures in the years ahead. A government that has taken us through the worst crisis we've seen in 3 generations, or a Labor Party that doesn't know how to manage money and hasn't got a great record when it comes to managing a strong economy.